the title of this talk, rather humorously, is LLM bots for development, and then when things go wrong. And ultimately, the thing that we're trying to show off today is some of the sort of harder lessons that we have developed in here, and then in particular, then how those lessons and tools can be reflected back to really an open source movement. And with the thesis being, hey, if we can share essentially these higher level abstractions of recipes and make those really easy to run, we're going to be able to enhance the innovation infrastructure of the world and the development sector in particular. So that's what the talk is about. And we'll kind of walk through, the amazing, terrifying future, how we got started this in terms of low resource farm bots, some of the lessons that we take from open source, and then how we think about strategy and the kind of architecture that makes all of this happen. And then we'll get into like, okay, what were the problems that we ran into on the chatbot side, and how do we solve those? And then finally end with a call to share. In terms of my own background, I studied public policy and computer science, did a little stint working for Ira Magaziner when he was in Clinton's internet policy czar, ended up at Microsoft working on Office and Windows, and then in 2004 moved out to India to help start the research lab there. I fell in love with the problem of how do we use technology to help informal sector labor find better jobs, and so I started a company called BabaJob, which became the largest informal sector job site in India. We have 9 million users, facilitated about 500,000 hires. And then during that time, frankly, did a lot with, earlier versions of AI chatbots, which we found, via things like Facebook and SMS were really good ways to get informal sector job seekers to actually engage with jobs. And then about 2 years ago, pivoted into GUI. And so in terms of the bot space in particular, we've done a fair amount at this point. In our kind of earlier incarnation 3 years ago, we had really early access to GPT-3 and made sort of a set of interactive Turing test passing bots, really to try to give voice to undervoiced characters or undervoiced communities on the internet in particular. That was really an art project that then inspired GUI as a platform to really help anyone sort of connect disparate AI tools and turn them into useful stuff. One of the first projects that we did was working with IPRD to basically take WHO health guidelines and basically, use that as a RAG for a retrieval augmented AI bot assistant to help nurses do triage in Nigeria. And then we've also done commercial projects. We've taken like 1,000 manuals and 1,000 videos and sort of made oracles on Slackbot that can answer any question around ACs. Our thesis is that every job and every organization is going to end up using AI. And this is sort of leading to a terrifying race, right? Which is those that use AI will replace those that don't. It's scary, I think, to everybody. And so in such a world where we think there's going to be billions of prompt writers, right? And that the way that we differentiate ourselves is how well do you write those prompts? How well do you then connect this to other interesting tools out there or other custom data to sort of differentiate yourself? We think is going to be the main thing people do for work. And then in such a world, how do you then find everything that's working in your field? How do you use that? How do you fork it? How do you keep up with this sort of incredible pace of change when it seems like all industries are collapsing here? And you don't really want to be stuck on one stack or another. And then finally, this piece of, well, when all of this is happening and you should be able to like hot swap, one tool for another, you really want to be able to analyze results really fast to be able to say, are you making a difference in the lives of your users? Is it worth the money? How much is it worth? And then how do you really prove value to the constituents and your own stakeholders? So the first real, I would say, deep example of this that we did was a project that we started with Digital Green. Digital Green is I think a 5 or 6 time Gates Foundation fundee. Rick and Gandhi was an old colleague of mine at Microsoft Research. And they are an NGO that operates in both India and Africa. At this point, I think they're up to 7 million farmers. And what they've done for the last 20 years is they had a great insight, which is, people learn best when they learn from others like them. And so they basically developed a systematized and scalable routine where they would go to local small shareholder farmers, record the best practices that they had figured out. So if they figured out a new technique to grow soybeans better, they would just record this and then curate it into small videos and then display those to other nearby farmers and other ones say 10 miles away. And this worked amazingly well to get farmers to believe that, and trust their livelihoods in a different methodology. And, in the face of climate change, when every crop on Earth probably needs to be changed and every crop practice and growing practice for our agriculture over the next decade likely needs to be changed, it's really important that we, one, figure out the right, techniques, right, at very localized settings, and then convince farmers that this is worth doing. And so they've been able to show that via this method that it's massively cheaper and more effective to basically record one farmer and then show that to another farmer like them, right? To say, this is how I did it. Here's the techniques you might want to try. And it's interesting because that same methodology or the same overall thinking, which is if one person figures out a good technique, you want to share that with other people in the field, is exactly the point of GUI as well, but just at a much higher technical level. And so in short, we started working with them in November of last year. And at this point, I'll make this bigger. If you guys can see this. And so, the goal that they had is they had, literally 10,000 videos, 100 million views on YouTube. And the goal was, how do we make this truly accessible to farmers and extension agents who act as mentors for them? And so the goal here was, could we, on WhatsApp, which, for many of the users is the dominant communication medium. Obviously, I don't need to tell folks here, it works great offline, it works great in bad internet connections. It's free largely to use, except for the data. So in short, we wanted to make all of this, insights and data and, Ministry of Agricultural guidance and facts of, call center logs that were hundreds long, editable and vetted by local experts, and use that as the knowledge base rather than, the aggregate training of the internet, which is going to give, incorrect advice. That we wanted to simplify this and very importantly, give citations and links back to the videos, right? That where the AI really is determining that this advice would be relevant. And the reason there is trust is so important. As Rickon points out all the time, when you give a piece of advice, the first question any farmer asks is, well, who's giving it? Where does he live? What's his family name? What does he grow or she grow? And so we have to connect back to the source material. And that's terribly important in this particular use case. That we wanted to do this in Indic use languages, and we wanted to do it with voice. Many of the folks here are certainly not literate in English, and voice is easier. And then, in practice and in time, we found that, over 1/3 of users organically just started posting photos of ailing crops. And so we said, well, we should be able to diagnose crops issues from those photos. So this ultimately became a project called Farmer Chat that we released last year. Rickon demoed this at the UN General Assembly Science Panel literally a year ago now. And then to give you a sense of how it works. Basically, people just go to if they text and say hi to a WhatsApp bot, this comes in, they can record their voice. We sort of give back, this is what we think we heard. They get an answer back. They can do up-down feedback on that. This also works in multiple languages. So, if they go ahead and record an audio piece in Hindi, we show that, and then we give that answer back. And then you can see that, we'll give back references to the videos that we used to find this. We sort of extended this to also work with photos once GPT Vision came out. And that works reasonably well too. And if you want to play with them, you can scan these links to go ahead and do it. The results were pretty good. We've had about 35,000 messages across 1,500 users, and that was just through the evaluation period from May to about September of last year. And then, we put together a cohort. And so, with the IAP Digital Innovation Challenge, the work has been refunded. And it's really informing the larger national rollout in terms of, the Indian government via the Vistar project, which over the next 18 months is trying to roll this out to 300,000 extension agents so that every mentor for farmers has access to a bot, right, in local languages that will allow them to do this advice. And then the part for today, because this is a slightly more technical talk, is, us kind of breaking down, okay, how you think this works, and then what are all the problems that we ran into, and then how do we try to fix them? So, on one side, there's this, thing of like, okay, Digital Green has a bunch of videos and it has PDFs of, how to do wheat cultivation and all of this guidance from the Ministry of Agriculture. That should really be the basis of our knowledge base. And then on the other side, you have farmers and extension agents that know how to use WhatsApp. And so, you would think like, oh, we'll just put everything that we do into a big knowledge base, right? And this is the sort of normal retrieval augmented generation path for bots, right? And so we put that into a knowledge base, and then we take that message from WhatsApp, we run speech recognition on it, and then we basically get a query out of that from the knowledge base. We take back little snippets of those results from the relevant videos or PDFs or whatnot, and then we summarize them with a GPT-4 script, and we then do text to speech and replies voice. This is the sort of simplified version of what's happened and kind of like how we approached the architecture a year ago. And then, but things go wrong is the problem. And so, the first thing that we begin to notice is, if you're speaking Hindi like folks do in Delhi, speech recognition works pretty well. If you're speaking Bhojpuri or many of the dialects that essentially the poorest users throughout the world tend to speak, these AI models in general don't work that well. They don't work very well for mixed use languages either. And then, the next thing that we notice is video transcripts. If you just take the raw, somewhat rambling, not always structured, just 3-minute video, even if it's been edited down of a farmer talking about how they can grow chili better in Haryana, it's not necessarily going to be great once it goes into that vector DB in terms of matching with the types of questions that people might ask for which that video is relevant. That in general, these vector DBs, these databases that are, enabling these searches to be possible, they really like, either very short or long form text. And a lot of times, we'll have tables, we'll have, complicated PDFs in here, we have pictures and diagrams. And so it doesn't always fit with basically the core technology in terms of making that knowledge base work. The other thing that we found is normal people, normal knowledge experts, right? Folks that are not familiar with AI, but are, basically at the kind of subsector at that like district level. If a new hurricane comes, they need to be able to say, hey, this is the guidance, right? In terms of, basically this is how you can go and get aid. This is how you should now do planting. This is how you can recover from it. And so the local on the ground next experts we found had to be able to update very quickly this database when we identified gaps and when there are things that we needed more information. In general, these vector databases don't like the concept of follow-up questions, so you have to build technology around that. They tend to be bad at handling really particular keywords. And so, many of the search techniques are great for concepts, but the sort of more traditional thing of if I've got a particular fertilizer and that I'm using, and I want to get all of the relevant information around that, I don't want general fertilizer. I want the very specific things that are related to this particular one. And so creating a system that can do both conceptual questions and these keywords is itself difficult and an important challenge to solve. Finally, if it's slow, people don't use it. So speed matters tremendously here. Figuring out where bugs are when you have these long chains of prompts and AI and knowledge bases is very difficult. Simply figuring out, and how do you really know that whatever the bot created as an answer is good or bad also really matters and is a difficult one, and you want to be able to do this at scale. Finally, every time you want to make a change, you have to ask yourself, does this make it better? Is this evaluating better? If I use, GPT-4 versus 3.5, is it better? If I use Mistral versus Llama 3 versus Gemini 1.5, is it better? Is it cheaper? Is it faster? These are all core questions to Digital Green as an organizer, and for anybody trying to actually provide services here. That aren't necessarily obvious to really answer, or at least weren't today. And I think we have some reasonable answers to it. It's very expensive, so this cost optimization matters. To sort of repeat, these low language. It's not just for speech recognition; it's also for translation and text to speech. It needs to get better for the low rate source piece. And then finally, evaluation and impact is really hard. And so I think we actually have some solutions that we can share with you guys in terms of how we made this work, and hopefully that's useful. So, as I said, our goal really in all of this is, that these solutions can be reusable and that they're future-proof, such that, when new innovations come out tomorrow and the next day from OpenAI and the open source community and Google and Mistral, we can take the aggregation of all of them. We take many lessons from open source and the open source software movement, which is really part of a larger knowledge movement before it, which is, we can learn from others. And in doing so, this is how we move forward the industry, that if we can reuse the work that others do, this allows us to build on top of each other's knowledge. So, peer-reviewed papers are exactly this process. And they were then the inspiration for, arguably like open source code repos. And so we're making the argument of, well, we should do the same thing for these little AI recipes as well. That we should make it fun, that obviously we have to include everyone if we're going to actually enhance the productivity of everyone on Earth. And then finally, this is a computer sciencey term, but that we should keep abstracting, right? So we have a belief that we're, sort of moving from code to these higher level kind of connections and prompts. And that in that abstraction, we get to take advantage of more and more of all of the great innovation and software that people made before us. So what we do, at GUI is we're trying to be, essentially like the Pinterest and GitHub of AI recipes. And so you can think of us as a low-code tool and platform where people can discover these workflows or AI recipes, I'll use those interchangeably, that really get to take advantage of the best of private AI, so OpenAI, Claude, Google, and the open source infrastructures. And what you see here is, our explore page where you can really just dig in and say, I want to build a copilot, I want to do animation, I want to, solve any of these problems, and then you can immediately see and run those recipes, and I'll show you how that works. And so, how we work is we take this view that at the base level, we try to abstract all of, the big AI models and essentially trying to commoditize them. And so in this sense, if you've got an LLM that needs to interpret, you give it text and it's giving you back an answer, you can hot swap OpenAI for Gemini, for Llama 3 now, for Mistral. And we basically maintain a set of private API keys plus these big GPU models so that you as the caller don't really need to worry about that. And you can just worry about the cost and performance of each one of these models. And I'll sort of break that down of what does that really mean. And so, over here, this is our LLM recipe where you can compare all of them. We do the same thing for speech recognition. We do the same thing for images. And so, the thing that you're seeing here is we do the same thing, not just for LLMs, but for these speech recognition engines. And so at this point, and I think this is the most exciting part to like the specific audience of, Gates fundees that are working throughout the world, we run hot all of the best speech recognition models on Earth. And by running hot, that means we're running them on a dedicated set of very expensive GPUs, which means, given the fact that we're running the massively multilingual search piece from Meta, it means we have speech language recognition available for 1,000 languages in response times that are usually less than 3 to 4 or 5 seconds. There's no one that's running those as fast as we are right now, and with kind of real-time responsiveness. And then we do that and then we allow you to compare to say, well, how does that work against Azure, which has a different set of languages that it does well, versus the best from Google, which is a different set, versus the best from OpenAI, which is again a different set. And then you'll see that the governments around the world, India in particular in this case, are making their own fine-tuned speech recognition models that they're putting up open source on places like Hugging Face. But if you want to run them, you can't really rely on Hugging Face, and it may take up to a minute to give you an answer back. And so we make those available on our own servers, and we make that fast, and then we allow you essentially to use those in all of the chatbots and the everything that we see here. And then we do the same thing for speech, for text-to-speech, which basically means when the bot talks back, it has an accent that people understand. Our whole model is that, as I've sort of alluded to before, is that, everything in our world is a recipe, which you can think of as a little bit of like an LLM prompt and settings and calls to these models. And when you run a recipe, you're spending credits. And that allows us to pay for all of these models that you see underneath. And, in general, our billing model is, you may pay 3 to 4 cents to run a recipe, and that's paying for all of the API calls that are going on underneath the hood. And then the idea is then each one of these recipes can then talk to arbitrary data. So here's one where you're summarizing Google, but to get to the part that's, I think, you're summarizing documents with GPT-4. And then, that, as I said, we wish to enable this reuse. And so you'll see here that everything that people do, you can find, you can discover. You'll find that in time, like in this particular case, they're making QR codes. But the point here is if I can go into like Alex and I like the stuff that he's made, I can see all of the recipes that he's made and fork them. Or in this particular case, Misha, whose real name is Anish, he's made a set of bots that are suddenly then available for anyone else to go ahead and fork and play with. And so this ultimately, this is where the Pinterest part of the, Pinterest plus GitHub comes into play. That these tools can be made useful if people wish to share them, and they don't have to. We've had a reasonable amount of traction, about 300,000 users. We're up to about actually 400,000. This is only through January, over 2 million workloads. In, about, over, I think, 15,000 or to 13,000 active users per week. This is from the beginning of April. We keep going up, and about 1,500 DAUs. So really, this is just saying we have a reasonable level of scale. And then finally, this is, I think, the part that for the folks here will be most interested is, we abstract all of these essentially into bots, among other things, but one of the deep things that we do is in the bot ecosystem. And so I'll kind of walk you through those and give you some actual live demos of how that works and what that is. So at a high level, we allow you to take any one of these recipes and connect it into WhatsApp. You can just bring your own WhatsApp number, which we find, given that KYC requirements are different all over the world for provisioning telephone numbers. If you get a SIM, you can come to us and connect that SIM into WhatsApp, own that thing yourself. And the idea too is like there's a lot of brand equity that goes into that number. So you can do that. What you're seeing on the right is something we're just coming out with this week, which is basically you can have web widgets for these things. And so at this point, I will show you some live demo of like how does that work. So if I come in here, this is our little demo page of it, but I can click on help. And this is again that kind of farmer chat example. And if I want to say, hey, when should I plant chili if I live in Haryana? Haryana is a state in India. And so you can see it's taking what I've said, and uploading that, it's transcribing that first via, Google's chirp/UPN model. It said, okay, it understood what I said, what should I plant chili if I live in Haryana? There was a spelling error there, it figured it out. And then, it gave me the answer that came back here. It gave back a reference. If I want to check out the source associated with that reference, this is the video that talks about essentially when to grow that. And then if I want to look at the guide that basically is, talking about this particular one of the things that we do is we also give back, references back to those. And if it's relevant, we also give back the page number so that when people open this up, they go back literally to the page number where, this information came from. And then, if you as an organization, all of this is editable, right? So you can change, you can change, if I go back here, you can obviously change the icon and the default questions and everything else. You can host these as a full page part. If you want to host this inside of your own Android app, you can do that too. And then, to give you a sense too of that this is real and this is live, this is the workflow that's really driving it, which is based, as I said, on the farmer chat workflow. And so you'll see here that this is how I can interact with these things on WhatsApp. But if you go down all the way to the bottom, this is really the workflow that drives farmer chat. And so we've just forked that. We have a slightly different one just for demo purposes, but it's roughly the same, which is you can see the instructions. I can go in here and pick a different model if I wanted to pick a different model. I can, this is essentially the knowledge base, right, that we have in here, which is all of the video transcripts and all of those manuals that have been put in. And this is where, you can say, hey, I want to change the accents. I want to do a different speechwriter. And if I want to, again, change the language, all of these things are possible. If you do want to enable people to send up photos, you can just kind of turn that on here. And then, and basically once you've made those changes, you just go over to the integrations tab. And if you tap on add integration, this is where you sort of can hook up and connect that to anything that you've got. So that's kind of, the bot piece at the highest sort of simplest level. And I think for us, the part where that was exciting, though, and this gets back to this sharing paradigm, is because we did this work with Digital Green, right? And, this was the vision part that came through. It was then covered by The Guardian at the September of last year. And then Opportunity, which, also works in different regions, but, the small holders in the microfinance space, but they also do a bunch of stuff around raising productivity of farmers. They heard about this, and they were able to ultimately fork this with their own documents, right, with their own guidance from the Ministry of Agriculture of Malawi, which is where, Digital Green doesn't work. And they were able to take this forward and literally, the quote from them was they've been working for 4 months with 3 developers trying to build a RAG-bot. And literally in an afternoon, we were able to just take their documents and say, great, this now works for, Chichewa. And we figured out what's the right model for Chichewa and hooked it up to WhatsApp bot. And we're able to basically give them all the functionality that they had worked on for the last 4 months with 3 folks literally in an afternoon. And then similarly, we've been doing a lot of stuff with Nandan Nilekani's organization, People Plus AI in India, to basically make tools to allow people to apply for government schemes just by taking pictures of their core documents, and really get access to these life-changing scholarships, and really almost like TurboTax for government schemes in your local language on WhatsApp is really the vision of what we're trying to create there. And then again, all of those recipes are available for any other organization globally to go ahead and use and reuse and refill. And so, and then finally, as I mentioned, eval really matters here. And so on top of these bots, we have a bunch of tools to enable evaluation, analytics, built-in feedback, and parsing of structured data. And then finally, these bulk evaluation pieces, which I'll show you. And so, when you make a bot, you can see everybody gets analytics. You can see how many messages are being sent, what are the daily usage patterns, how many are live, what are my active numbers. I think the most interesting one here is actually this green line, which is every time we send a message and we get back an answer, we run another script that basically says, did the bot answer the question? Or did it come back with essentially, hey, I couldn't find this. This was outside of my domain of knowledge. And so this gives us an automated way to know, even without any user feedback, to know how well are we doing to actually answer user questions. And then as you saw, this up-down feedback you can also use here too, but you don't get as much of that on every question. And so this sort of automated analysis ends up being really important too. We have large-scale bulk analysis and kind of running. And so the thing that this allows us to figure out is, as you can see here, is we're trying to figure out which is the right model today, given that low resource languages are not the focus of these big tech organizations. Which ones actually understand my users the best? And so what we've built is essentially an evaluation framework, which works in this particular case against a set of audio files that you see here on the right. And this is a picture and then a transcription of that, which is essentially like your golden translations for your user set. And then what we're doing is we're running that translation against all of these models, Whisper Large, Chirp, Azure, Seamless, and then scoring their answers to then tell you, okay, for your user set and this particular set of data, the Chirp cognitive model is actually the one that you should be using if you want the system to understand your users. And this is a really useful thing to know because every day there's a new model coming out. And if you're working with low resource languages and you're working with low resource users, it's really important. Like if you can't understand them, then the AI models can't understand them. We're really not going to be able to do much. And so this is, again, a tool that's available for anybody to use. If you go to GUI/bulk, you can basically use this for your own data set and your own set of languages. So then to get back to our earlier point of how does Farmer Chat actually work, it's more complicated, is the sort of answer, which is, on the right for WhatsApp, we're running Hindi speech recognition via WhatsApp for Bosnia, and then we're doing translate. It's going into a chat piece. We actually have to summarize it. It goes into a big Vesper DB. We're running a combination of models for analyzing these photo pictures. And then at the bottom, there's a whole bunch of stuff in terms of analysis. And then, there on the left side, and we didn't get really did too much today of there's a bunch of sort of synthetic data preparation to take those raw, Hindi video transcripts. And then what we do is we basically have the LLMs look at that to tease out what are the facts. And then we actually push that into Google Docs, right? Which your organization or whoever you're working with can actually edit. And that's what then actually goes into the knowledge base. And then the advantage of this is, if there's a new question, if something needs to change in real time, the local experts can use tools that they know how to use, Google Sheets on their phone, to basically edit this knowledge base that makes all this possible. So, and back to kind of close out where we started, how did we fix all that stuff that went wrong? Which is, how do we basically solve the problem of the low resource languages aren't very well understood? The answer is we built out our own GPU cluster, and this model sort of stacked over the best of private and open source. And then we use different models for long and short audio. How do we solve the video transcript problem? I talked about the synthetic data pipelines. We've done a lot to basically run OCR and this sort of Google Sheets as the intermediary piece to basically help with chunking so we actually can understand odd, complicated tables. Well, this is a little bit too technical. How do people update it? Again, it's called Google Docs. We have built-in kind of conversation summarizers so that, if you ask a question, when should I plant my chili crop in Haryana? And you ask the follow-up question, and it gives you an answer, and you say, I don't understand. It knows from the conversation history that what you asked before, and it will ask an appropriate follow-up question. This piece of, vector databases can't handle keywords. We've got a very smart thing that can basically do both conceptual search and this keyword search. We've made tremendous investments to make this fast. And so if you upload any documents or put in Google pieces, all of that is essentially put into our database. And we've taken literally search times from 1,000 documents taking about 20 seconds to search through the vector database to under 0.7 seconds. And then we've enabled streaming, as you saw on that little web widget on WhatsApp as well, which really gives a sense that the bot is listening to us faster. We've got a bunch of stuff to help debugging, this built-in feedback part, and then you saw a little bit of this kind of golden question eval. Then the one thing is in terms of costing, we have per API billing, right, which we think really spreads this out. So, other organizations building on top of us don't have to pay this huge amount. We're running all of the best low language resource models that we can get our hands on. And then, we've built up these evaluation pieces and we've got these meta-analysis. And so hopefully that allows, for impact evaluation for everyone that's using us. And so that's kind of the main heart, I don't want to do that, of the talk. And so I guess the one sort of part I would leave you with as we kind of going forward here is that in time we want everybody to be able to discover all of these recipes. So to give you a sense of what I mean, if you come over here into Copilot and you check out these examples, there are the examples that we actually have from, this is the work that we're doing with People Plus AI to help people fill out onboarding applications. You can see the Swahili version of Farmer Chat is here. This is work that we did with IPRD and their health bot, which is taking in, as I said, the Ministry of Agriculture guidelines and how they work. And so all of these are available for folks to fork. You don't have to be made available if you work with us, but if it is, then this adds to the innovation ecosystem that we all get to use. So my sort of last call to action in all of this is go on. I would encourage everybody to try something out on GUI. It's everyone gets $10 of credits or 1,000 credits when they sign up. And then, find a recipe that you like, fork it, and then share that recipe back. I know that was a long stream, but I'd happy to take questions.